What if everything you were taught to chase was a trap? What if the golden promise of retirement, the dream sold to you since childhood, was never freedom at all, but a subtle kind of prison? Not a prison of walls and guards, but of calendars and countdowns. A quiet resignation to a life postponed. We live in a world that teaches you to delay joy. Work now, save, sacrifice. Suffer through the week to enjoy the weekend. Suffer through 40 years to enjoy the final 20, if you're lucky. The system whispers, just wait. Your freedom is coming. One day. But what if that day never comes? This illusion, this baited hook, is everywhere. It starts young. You are told to go to school so you can get a good job. Get a good job so you can earn enough money. Earn enough money so you can retire. And retirement? That's when life finally begins. That's when you'll have time to paint, to travel, to sit under trees without glancing at your watch. But until then, endure. Alan Watts, a philosopher of rare clarity, once described this model as a kind of spiritual postponement, a treadmill disguised as progress, a symphony that never plays its final note. And it is only when you step back that you see how deeply this lie is embedded in the architecture of our minds. The idea that fulfillment must be earned through decades of sacrifice is not just personal. It is cultural and historical. You see echoes of it in feudal systems where peasants toiled for a lifetime in exchange for vague security, in industrial revolutions where factory workers labored like machines with the hope of a pension, in modern corporate structures where the 401k becomes the carrot on the stick, always just far enough ahead to keep you moving, but never close enough to touch. And here is the part no one tells you. Many reach that long-awaited finish line only to find it empty. No music, no fireworks, just silence. Because the habit of postponing life doesn't stop when you retire. It continues. Until the body slows. Until the mind forgets. Until the freedom you waited for feels overwhelming, or worse, pointless. This script is not an attack on planning. It is not a sermon about quitting your job to live in a van. It is a deeper examination of how we define freedom, of how we confuse escape with arrival, and how a life that is always waiting is not truly lived. In this journey, we will look at how cultures across time have viewed work, purpose, and freedom. We'll dive into the psychology of delayed gratification, the roots of the retirement myth, and why Alan Watts believed we were missing the point entirely. This is not just about money. This is about time, about meaning, about what you are truly here to do with your precious, fleeting life. So, pause, breathe, let the dust of old beliefs begin to settle. You may find that the door to freedom was never locked, only painted to look like a wall. To understand the myth of retirement and the illusion of delayed freedom, we must first step back, way back. Before corporations, before cubicles, before the idea of a career path even existed. In ancient times, life was not divided into rigid compartments of work and retirement. Among hunter-gatherer societies, there was no such thing as a career. Survival, community, and purpose were intertwined. The elders didn't stop contributing once they reached a certain age. Their roles simply shifted, from hunter to teacher, from provider to storyteller, from laborer to wisdom keeper. Aging wasn't a slow fade into irrelevance. It was a deepening of presence. Contrast this with the modern view, where retirement often signals a fading into the background, a life of earning your rest only after decades of grinding, a reward for surviving the system, not for truly living. This shift began with the rise of agricultural civilizations. As land ownership became centralized and surplus labor became the norm, people were slotted into roles based on function rather than meaning. Work became more repetitive, more transactional. And slowly the idea of earning rest through toil was born. In ancient Egypt, farmers and builders were worked relentlessly under the sun, their worth measured by what they could produce. There was no concept of retirement, only exhaustion, collapse, and death. But it was the Industrial Revolution that cemented the modern notion of retirement. As factories replaced fields and machines replaced muscle, people were no longer artisans or community members. They were workers. Cogs in a larger machine, time became money, and soon life became a schedule. Governments began to respond to the growing crisis of aging workers with nowhere to go. In 1889, Germany introduced the first formal retirement system under Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. It offered financial support to those over 70. But at the time, the average life expectancy was 45. It was a symbolic gesture more than a practical one. Retirement, then, was never meant to be a vibrant second life. It was a bureaucratic solution to a workforce problem. In America, the Social Security Act of 1935 institutionalized retirement as a cultural milestone. Workers were promised a form of financial safety net if they made it to 65. And thus, a new dream was born. Endure the grind, collect your pension, and ride into the sunset. But underneath that dream was a darker truth. The system needed you to believe in retirement so you wouldn't question the system itself. It needed you to pour your best years, your energy, your creativity, your soul, into it, in exchange for a distant promise of peace. Alan Watts challenged this linear view of life. He believed that life was not a path to be walked from struggle to reward, but a dance to be danced now. That the present moment held more truth than any distant goal. And yet the idea of retirement continued to grow. Post-war America glorified the image of the retiree on a golf course, drink in hand, home paid off, nothing to do but relax. It became a symbol of success. But symbols can be deceiving, because many who arrive at this promised land find themselves restless, lost, disconnected. After decades of identifying with work, they no longer know who they are without it. The thing they looked forward to feels hollow because their purpose was never integrated. It was outsourced, and purpose cannot be postponed. Let's look at Eastern philosophies for a moment. In traditional Hindu thought, life was divided into 4 stages. Brahmacharya, the student phase; Grihastha, the householder, career, and family phase; Vanaprastha, the forest dweller, a gradual withdrawal from material duties; Sannyasa, the renunciate, devoted to inner freedom and spiritual truth. What's fascinating here is the gradual shift, not a sudden drop-off. Retirement wasn't the end. It was a transformation, a chance to redirect your energy inward, to deepen your being. In this light, retirement is not a finish line. It is a doorway. But that door only opens if you've been living with awareness all along. If not, it becomes a wall. You see, when life is lived unconsciously, freedom feels frightening. Silence feels like emptiness. Time feels like a threat. So how did we get here? We traded integration for separation, meaning for achievement. We separated the self from its natural rhythms and replaced it with a system of transactions. Work became disconnected from soul. The body became a machine, and the mind became a prisoner of the future. And we swallowed a dangerous lie, that we can earn freedom. But true freedom is not a product. It is not a reward. It is a state of being, one that must be cultivated, not acquired. Watts often spoke of the music of life, how we are taught to treat it like a race, always rushing to the next beat. But music is not about the last note. It's about the melody. The ancient Greeks had a word for this kind of deep, active fulfillment: eudaimonia. It wasn't just pleasure or rest. It was living in accordance with your inner nature. Retirement, as we know it today, is not eudaimonia. It is often the absence of it. Across cultures, true freedom was never framed as the absence of work. It was the presence of inner clarity, of alignment. The Zen master sweeping the floor is not working in the way we think of it. He is practicing presence. The Sufi poet is not writing for a pension, he is communing with the divine. The Stoic statesman is not enduring the Senate for applause, but for virtue. Compare that to today's burnout, where people stay in jobs they hate for years, convincing themselves they are being responsible. But the soul does not understand delayed fulfillment. It withers in waiting. This isn't to say retirement is bad. It is to say it's been misunderstood, mispackaged, sold to you as the point of it all, when in truth it is only a chapter, and not even the most vibrant one unless you've learned to live awake. We must unlearn the myth of retirement as a reward and reimagine it as a rite of passage, one that only reveals its gifts to those who haven't been asleep the whole way there. Now that we've looked at how history shaped this illusion, the next question becomes, why do we fall for it so deeply? What's happening psychologically that makes this narrative so seductive and so hard to escape? Why do we buy into the promise of retirement so willingly, despite its often hollow reality? The answer lies deep in our psychology, a web of conditioning, survival instincts, and cultural narratives that shape how we perceive time, purpose, and freedom. One of the key psychological concepts at play is delayed gratification. From childhood, we are taught to endure short-term discomfort for long-term gain. Eat your vegetables now, and you will get dessert later. Study hard now, and you will get a good job later. Work hard now, and you will retire someday. This principle underpins much of Western culture's approach to success and happiness. On the surface, delayed gratification sounds reasonable. Patience and perseverance are virtues after all. But it has a shadow side. When delayed gratification becomes a rigid rule, it can turn into a form of self-denial, where the present moment is always sacrificed for a future ideal. The mind becomes a constant ledger, tallying suffering against reward, but rarely recognizing the richness of the now. Alan Watts pointed out this trap with poetic clarity. He suggested that life is not a journey to be endured, but a dance to be enjoyed in every step. The problem with delayed gratification is that it treats life as a means to an end, rather than an end in itself. We become so focused on arriving at retirement that we forget to live. Psychologists also talk about time perspective, how individuals view their past, present, and future, and how this influences their decisions and well-being. People with a future-oriented perspective tend to plan and save, which is useful, but excessive future focus can lead to anxiety, dissatisfaction, and a diminished ability to appreciate the present. When the entire culture promotes future orientation, work now, play later, it can create a collective blindness to the gifts of today. You might find yourself constantly thinking about retirement as the only time when life will truly begin, which ironically robs the present of its vitality. Another important concept is identity foreclosure, a term from developmental psychology that describes when people commit to an identity without exploring alternatives. Many workers define themselves exclusively by their job title, their role in the system. They become the accountant, the teacher, the manager. This identity foreclosure can be comfortable but rigid. When retirement comes, the role vanishes, leaving a void. The loss of professional identity can trigger existential crises, feelings of worthlessness or depression. The body might be free, but the mind remains trapped in an old story that equates value with productivity. This struggle has parallels in the work of Carl Jung, who described the process of individuation as becoming whole, by integrating the conscious with the unconscious parts of the self. Jung believed that late adulthood, what we call retirement age, is an especially important time for this inner work. It is a chance to move beyond externally imposed roles and reconnect with deeper parts of the psyche. But for this to happen, we need to break the illusion that freedom is something we get after external achievements. Jung's archetypes offer a powerful lens here. Consider the hero archetype, the part of us that strives, fights, and conquers. Society tends to glorify this archetype, encouraging us to prove ourselves through external success. Yet there is another archetype, the wise old man or sage, who represents wisdom, acceptance, and inner peace. Retirement could be a time to embody this archetype, shifting from struggle to reflection, from doing to being, but only if we are prepared to let go of the first identity. In addition, modern social psychology reveals the power of social narratives in shaping our beliefs. The retirement dream is a collective story we inherit, reinforced by media, institutions, and peers. It promises freedom, but also imposes expectations and fears. What if you fail to retire properly? What if you find no joy? There is social pressure to conform to this script, even if it feels empty. This collective conditioning makes it difficult to imagine alternative ways of living and aging. Ancient wisdom traditions also remind us of the danger of postponing life. The Buddhist concept of impermanence teaches that all things change: health, wealth, youth, and opportunity. Clinging to the idea that happiness exists only in the future is a form of suffering known as dukkha. Watts often quoted Eastern philosophy to highlight that life's value lies in experiencing it fully now, not in escaping to some future reward. He used the metaphor of life as a musical note that must be played in its time. Waiting for the last note means missing the music altogether. From a neuropsychological standpoint, the brain's reward system is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, which means it naturally focuses on immediate gratification. But we have the capacity for executive control, the ability to delay impulses for long-term goals. This creates tension. The instinct to live fully now versus the cultural script to save joy for later. This tension can produce stress, guilt, or emptiness. You may feel torn between enjoying a sunset and feeling responsible for preparing for a distant retirement. This internal conflict is a source of much modern malaise. At the heart of it all is the question of meaning. Viktor Frankl, the famed psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, taught that human beings are driven by a search for meaning. Without meaning, even freedom feels hollow. Retirement often removes the external markers of meaning: work, roles, achievements, leaving a spiritual vacuum. Unless we cultivate inner sources of meaning, retirement can feel like a slow drift toward irrelevance. Alan Watts invites us to reframe freedom not as the absence of obligation, but as the presence of meaning in every moment. This reframing is subtle but powerful. It shifts the focus from escaping life's demands to embracing life's flow. So, as we navigate the psychological and social dimensions of retirement and freedom, it becomes clear that the problem is not the concept of retirement itself, but the story we tell about it. The next question naturally arises: what happens when this story is misunderstood or neglected? How does it affect our emotions, relationships, and sense of self? And how might this pattern repeat itself in history and myth? When we accept the lie that retirement is the ultimate reward, the end game that finally grants us freedom, we set ourselves up for a profound kind of disillusionment. This misconception doesn't just affect how we plan our finances or schedule our days. It seeps deeply into our sense of self, our emotional well-being, and the quality of our relationships. Many retirees report a surprising paradox. After years of chasing the promise of freedom, the moment they reach it feels empty or unsettling. They face what psychologists call a loss of purpose. Purpose has often been entangled with their work identity, social role, and daily routines. Once those dissolve, they confront a void, a silent question. Who am I if I am no longer defined by what I do? This loss can lead to feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and even depression. The steady rhythm of work, although sometimes exhausting, provided a structure, a reason to get up in the morning. Without it, time can feel oppressive rather than liberating. Days stretch endlessly, and the mind, once occupied, turns inward, sometimes to places of regret or fear. Consider the social consequences. Work is not just about income. It is a community and a shared purpose. Retirement can mean a shrinking social circle and a sense of invisibility. Friends and colleagues may continue in their roles while the retiree feels left behind, disconnected from the active pulse of life. This social isolation exacerbates emotional pain and can even impact physical health. Historically, societies that honored elders through active roles, like storytelling, mentoring, or ritual leadership, protected against this emptiness. In contrast, modern society Amy's tendency to sideline the elderly reflects a cultural failure to integrate aging as a vibrant, meaningful stage of life. We also see identity struggles mirrored in myth and literature. The story of the hero's journey, for instance, often culminates not in conquest, but in a return home with newfound wisdom. Yet many modern heroes of work remain trapped in endless striving, never reaching that stage of integration. When forced to stop, they experience a kind of death, the death of an identity they never fully examined or embraced. In some ways, retirement can become a forced confrontation with what Carl Jung called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have neglected or rejected. The active roles we played may have masked fears, unrealized dreams, or unresolved conflicts. When those roles disappear, the shadow demands attention. This can be painful but also offers a gateway to profound transformation if approached with courage. Emotionally, this period can evoke grief for lost youth, lost status, lost certainty. Yet grief is not only sorrow, it is a process of release and renewal. Unfortunately, many do not receive guidance on how to navigate this process, which leads to stagnation or despair. Another impact of the retirement myth is on younger generations who observe their elders. When freedom is portrayed as a distant prize, youth is often sacrificed at the altar of future reward. Burnout becomes normalized, and the cycle of deferred living repeats. This creates a society caught in a treadmill, where few learn to live fully in the present. The consequences stretch beyond the individual, influencing family dynamics as well. Adult children may feel pressure to care for elders who are struggling with this identity void, while retirees may feel like burdens. Communication can falter, creating emotional distance where closeness once existed. Even physically, the mind-body connection plays a role. Studies show that emotional well-being influences physical health and longevity. The stress of existential confusion can exacerbate chronic conditions, while a sense of purpose can enhance resilience and vitality. Interestingly, history provides examples of how neglecting this transition leads to societal decay. Civilizations that failed to honor aging and wisdom often crumbled under the weight of lost continuity. Without elders actively contributing their knowledge, communities lose their roots and guidance. Contrast this with indigenous cultures where elders are revered as living libraries essential to cultural survival. Here, freedom is not postponed, but woven into a lifetime of participation and respect. Aging is not withdrawal, but transformation. The emotional and social consequences of the retirement myth reveal a profound truth. Freedom is not a state to be acquired after toil, but a way of being cultivated throughout life. When misunderstood, it breeds isolation, confusion, and disconnection. But when embraced as a process of ongoing growth and integration, it can become a gateway to a richer, fuller existence. This leads us to a crucial reflection. How might we reclaim freedom as a living experience, rather than a distant promise? How can we prepare ourselves psychologically, socially, and spiritually to embrace life at every stage? If the lie we were told about retirement is that freedom awaits at the end of work, then the deeper truth is that freedom must be cultivated within the journey itself, moment by moment, day by day. It is not a finish line, but a way of being, a mindset, and a practice. So how do we begin to reclaim this authentic freedom? How do we shift from chasing a distant reward to living fully now, even as we prepare for the later stages of life? First, it starts with reframing purpose. Instead of anchoring meaning solely in productivity or job titles, we can embrace multiple sources of purpose that nourish different parts of ourselves, creative, relational, intellectual, spiritual. Journaling is a simple but powerful tool here. Regularly ask yourself, what brings me meaning today? How can I honor that, even in small ways? This practice helps break identity for closure and expands the sense of self beyond roles. Psychology offers us tools like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which can help identify and challenge limiting beliefs, such as the idea that only work defines our worth or that retirement equals emptiness. By consciously reframing these thoughts, we create space for more flexible, compassionate self-understanding. At the same time, ancient wisdom traditions provide profound practices to cultivate presence and acceptance. Stoicism, for instance, teaches us to distinguish between what we can control and what we cannot. We cannot control aging or societal narratives, but we can control our attitude toward them. Marcus Aurelius advised reflecting daily on the impermanence of life to foster gratitude and presence rather than anxiety. Similarly, mindfulness meditation invites us to step out of the relentless planning and worrying about the future and anchor ourselves in the unfolding present. Just a few minutes a day of mindful breathing or body awareness can cultivate the spaciousness needed to appreciate the moment rather than chase an idealized future. Alan Watts often spoke about the paradox of effort. The harder we chase freedom, the more elusive it becomes. Paradoxically, letting go of rigid control, letting life flow, opens us to genuine freedom. This surrender is not resignation but a deep trust in the process of life. We also find guidance in the Jungian concept of individuation. Retirement age can be seen as a vital opportunity to embark on this inner journey, integrating shadow aspects and discovering hidden parts of the psyche. Creative expression, through art, writing, music, can unlock these layers and foster self-discovery. Building a supportive community is equally essential. Engaging with others who share a similar stage or mindset offers connection, reduces isolation, and inspires growth. This could be through social groups, volunteering, or even online communities focused on mindful aging and personal development. Physical practices matter as well. Movement, whether yoga, walking in nature, or gentle stretching, connects mind and body, anchors us in the present, and supports emotional resilience. The body remembers what the mind sometimes forgets. Life is happening now. Importantly, embracing a growth mindset encourages us to see retirement not as an ending, but as a new chapter ripe with possibility. This mindset welcomes learning, adaptation, and even failure as natural parts of life's flow. For those who feel stuck, professional support from therapists or coaches skilled in life transitions can provide invaluable guidance. Exploring fears and hopes in a safe space helps untangle the knots of identity and purpose. Another practical step is to cultivate daily rituals that ground you. Rituals create structure but also meaning. Simple acts like morning gratitude, afternoon tea, or evening reflection can become touchstones of presence and joy. Finally, remember that these changes do not demand perfection or radical overhaul overnight. Freedom is cultivated gradually, through small, consistent acts of self-care, awareness, and courage. Pause for a moment. What small step can you take today to bring more presence and meaning into your life? How might you begin to see freedom not as a distant goal, but as a companion on your journey? By weaving together modern psychology with timeless wisdom, we create a roadmap to navigate the complexities of aging, retirement, and freedom, not as a myth to chase, but as a living reality to embrace. As we come to the close of this exploration, it is clear that the story we have been told about retirement and freedom, about a distant paradise that awaits only after decades of work, is a powerful but misleading myth. This myth, like so many others, shapes how we live and how we understand ourselves. It lures us into postponing life itself, convincing us that our truest moments lie somewhere beyond the horizon, rather than here in the present. Yet, as Alan Watts so eloquently reminded us, life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. The promise of freedom is not a finish line. It is a continual unfolding, a dance with time and change. The lie of retirement as ultimate freedom obscures a more profound truth, that freedom is a state of awareness, a way of engaging with life that can be practiced at any age. Throughout history, from ancient philosophers to indigenous elders, we see a shared understanding. Life, as richest freedom, arises not from external circumstances but from internal alignment. The Greeks spoke of eudaimonia, flourishing through virtue and purpose. The Stoics taught us to master our attitudes. The wisdom traditions taught surrender, presence, and integration. These insights remind us that freedom is not about escape or accumulation, but about acceptance, growth, and connection. Psychologically, we have uncovered how our identities are often narrowly constructed around productivity and roles, leaving us vulnerable when those external markers shift or disappear. The emptiness felt in retirement is not a failure, but a natural signal urging us toward deeper self-awareness and reinvention. This transition is a call to embrace shadow parts, to heal old wounds, and to craft a new narrative of meaning that honors all dimensions of who we are. The consequences of ignoring this call are significant: loneliness, loss of purpose, and social disconnection. But so too is the opportunity. By approaching this stage with curiosity, compassion, and intentionality, we open the door to a renewed freedom, one rooted in presence, creativity, and authentic connection. Imagine what it would be like to wake up each day feeling engaged not because you have to, but because you want to. Not because society demands it, but because your soul calls you. Imagine living not for a distant future, but fully here, embracing the dance of life with openness and grace. This is not just a personal journey, but a collective one. As more of us awaken to the truth of freedom beyond retirement, we reshape cultural narratives about aging, work, and worth. We create communities where elders are honored as vital contributors, where time is seen as a gift, and where life's later chapters are anticipated with joy rather than fear. So now, as you reflect on your own story, ask yourself, how have you been shaped by the myth of retirement as freedom? What parts of your identity might you explore beyond work and roles? What small practices can you begin today to cultivate presence and purpose? There is no perfect answer, only the invitation to begin, to keep moving gently toward a fuller life. And as Alan Watts taught, the journey itself is the destination. Thank you for walking this path with me. May your steps be steady, your heart open, and your freedom ever present. If you have found value in this deep dive into the myth of retirement and the true nature of freedom, then you are not alone in your search for meaning beyond the surface. Here, we create a space not just for information, but for transformation, where psychology meets history and where ancient wisdom blends with modern insights to guide us toward living with greater presence and purpose. You might be feeling that pull inside, the quiet urging to reclaim your personal power, to master your own story, and to live intentionally rather than by default. This journey is not easy, but it is deeply rewarding, and you do not have to walk it alone. By subscribing, you join a community committed to emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and meaningful reflection, a place where we explore the subtle forces that shape our lives, challenge limiting beliefs, and cultivate the courage to grow. Together, we uncover how power truly operates, not as control over others but mastery of self, rooted in integrity, vision, and emotional regulation. This channel is a refuge from the noise of superficial content. Here, we lean into discomfort and uncertainty with curiosity. We embrace the complexity of human experience and celebrate the slow unfolding of wisdom. If you seek more than quick fixes and surface-level motivation, if you hunger for real growth that touches your heart and soul, then this is the space for you. So, will you take the next step with us? Will you commit to exploring the depths within and stepping more fully into your own freedom? Subscribe, and let us walk this path together, learning, reflecting, and growing toward lives that are not just survived, but truly lived. Remember, freedom is not a distant prize. It is present now, in every breath, every moment. Let us discover it together.